Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Society of Ridgewood. My name is Sarah Lindsay and I am the minister here at this congregation which has been meeting for 125 years. Unitarian Universalism is not a religion of dogma or creed, but one of promise and covenant. We declare to each other how we will be together as we seek the deep truths of being human and living well. We commit to being together with kindness, intention, and love, as we ask questions and as we remember our spiritual inheritances, a belief in the interconnection of all things, and in a belief in love that can change the world. Here we ever widen our embrace, called by our shared statements of conscience, affirming the importance of working for racial justice, environmental justice, and LGBTQ justice. Our work to right this world is never done, even as with joy we affirm all that is beautiful and wondrous. If you are new to USR and you want to know more about who we are and what we do, the best thing to do is talk to one of us. So if you're here in Anderson, just stop anyone. If you're on Zoom, feel free to message into the chat and someone will chat back to you and get you connected to the website and the e-blasts. If you're online, we're also going to drop a Google chat link or a Google form link into the chat, and you can fill that out to get connected as well. Online, if you are open to it, we have breakout coffee hour online after the service ends, so you can just remain and you'll get an invitation to a breakout room. Here in Anderson, there are some specific instructions, which Jack, I think, is going to give during the announcement, so I will leave that to you, Jack. Thank you. Finally, a reminder, if you're here in person, please silence your electronic devices. We've all gotten out of the habit, but let's remember this morning. It is good to be with you. Please now join me in the words for lighting the chalice. They'll be on the screen. We light this chalice for the light of truth, the warmth of love, and the energy of action as we gather together in the circle of community. This morning, as we mark the winter solstice, our centering words are adapted from an invocation found in our green hymnal. The words are by Joan Goodwin, and they call to the four directions, so we will ring our sound after we've called each direction. Spirit of the East, Spirit of air, of morning and springtime, be with us as the sun rises, in times of beginning, times of planting. Spirit of the South, Spirit of fire, of noontime and summer, be with us through the heat of the day and help us to be ever growing. Spirit of the West, Spirit of water, of evening and autumn, be with us as the sun sets and help us to enjoy a rich harvest. Spirit of the North, Spirit of earth, of nighttime and winter, be with us in the darkness, in the time of gestation. The earth tilts, the solstice comes. For some, this means long days leaning toward the blazing sun. For us, in this part of the earth, this moment means leaning toward darkness, the cold of long evenings, the beauty of the dark. Too often we fret about the deep nights and wait breathlessly for the returning light, but the dark holds its own glory. In the cold of the ground, new life stirs, gathering energy, building resistance, finding a way. The plants make their springtime plans. In the cold of the air, we know balance in a new way. We come to understand how the day and the night belong to one another. And it is in the winter, in the depth of the cold and the long nights, that creatures like us find warmth in community, in good food and laughter and song, creating ways to share heat and light. In this approaching solstice moment, we do not tilt away from the sun. We're not defined by lack on the deepest night, but by wonder and beauty and depth and strength. We tilt toward a renewed knowledge of ourselves. We tilt toward a more honest relationship with this earth. We tilt toward a keen awareness of the cycles that hold us. The earth tilts, the solstice comes, and we are given a chance to know love in new ways. Thank you for being with us this morning as we move together toward the miracles of winter.
Good morning. My name is Jack Lohr. I am Vice President for the Unitarian Society of Ridgewood. One of the promises we make to each other in our shared covenant at USR is to support this congregation with our presence, gifts, and service, and to care for each other and the long-term well-being of our community. This is the time in the service when we put that promise into action, by reminding each other that we share a vision of justice, of freedom for this world, and that it takes all of our different talents, gifts, and support to make that vision a reality. Here are a couple of ways to get involved at USR. Tonight at 7 p.m., there's a virtual-only Bluest Night service for those of us who are feeling pain or loss or just sadness at this holiday season. The Zoom link was in yesterday's email. It reads like a New York City phone number, 212-683-4988. The service is being created and led by 4 Unitarian Universalist ministers, including our Reverend Sarah Lindsay. Then on Christmas Eve at 4:30 p.m., we will have our annual Christmas Eve service. The logistics of this will be different, involving some time outside and some inside. Again, for that service, masks and proof of vaccination will be required for anyone ages 5 and up who wants to attend in person. Of course, that service will also be broadcast simultaneously on Zoom. Today, a few instructions. Parents, please go immediately into Fellowship Hall for an important project with your children right after the service. Everyone else, please take a few minutes to look at the gingerbread houses at the side of Anderson. If you submitted one, please remain for the contest and the awarding of the prizes. If you did not, please take a moment to look and then head out of Anderson so that the children can come into the space and see the houses themselves. Thank you very much. We also uphold our covenant by our annual and weekly giving. December giving on Reeb Porch, which is the house next door, is collecting pet food, toys, and other items for A Pathway to Hope, founded 10 years ago by our very own RE parent, Amy Hofer, who I noticed has a gingerbread house in the competition today. They're dedicated to the rescue, rehabilitation, and adoption of abandoned dogs and cats with a focus on special needs cases, south to north rescue of northern breed dogs, local rescue of stray cats and all breeds of dogs, and community outreach furthering the cause of rescue. And of course, we need your money. The online offering will now be given and gratefully received.
This is the time in the service when we invite you to share the significant joys and sorrows of your own lives and to mark with us the world's joys and sorrows. If you are on Zoom, this is when we invite you to type into the chat. We'll give you a little bit of time to do so. Anything that you would like shared with the gathered community, I will keep an eye on the chat. And folks in person, if you filled out a sheet, you can bring that up to me now. As we give everyone a moment to share, I will just say I would like to lift up the continuing devastation and recovery from the weather-related disasters in Kentucky and elsewhere over the last, I guess it was last week. Also, the death of Bell Hooks, as you probably saw earlier this week. We hold that loss. And we celebrate with newer visitor, soon-to-be member Aurora, who had a grandson born just this past week as well. Carol is relieved and grateful that her cousin George, who was in a serious car accident, was unhurt, as was his companion. Sandy mourns the loss of Rita Duva, who died this past Tuesday. Rita was one of the few cousins left on the Himson side of the family. Bob celebrates having Doug and Claire here from San Francisco. Welcome. Give me one more minute. Mindful of the joys and sorrows that have been shared, but also of those that we hold in the quiet of our hearts, I ask you now to come into a time of reflection, meditation, prayer. You can find as comfortable a position for your body as you can. Close your eyes if that is most comfortable. This morning, I offer you words by my colleague, Lynn Cox, for our meditation. We pause as the path of the sun reverses, seemingly holding its place for a time of turning. Let us delve into the gifts of darkness at the winter solstice. We follow curiosity and contemplation down into the cold earth, taking a journey to the world below the surface. Here we find acorns, cached by squirrels and chipmunks, perhaps to be food laid in store, or perhaps to become trees in the fullness of time. We find the burrows of hibernating animals, those who sleep and repair. We find seeds, including some that will not sprout unless they first wait through frost and ice. Life finds rest and renewal in the darkness. May those who are weary find comfort. May those who are struggling find meaning and companionship. May those who are injured or ill find recovery. May those who hunger find abundance. Let this be a time of healing, and may the dreams of the dark lead us to share these gifts with one another. Our imagination rises back to the surface, to life where the cold ground meets the crisp air. Here, we observe life finding its way. We observe animals eating seeds left on the ground, though the harvest is long past. We notice the migration of birds, natural movement that allows populations to find places where they can thrive. We observe the trees that appear to sleep, and yet hold sap that will rise again before the spring arrives. We observe that not everything lives through the winter, and yet all that has lived returns to the earth and is transformed. Let this be a time of resilience. May the changing seasons bring new meaning and new insights. May creativity and persistence lead us to find resources for all to share. May those who migrate find safety. And may there be good news in the wind. May transformation lead us onward. We now lift our imagination to the sky, to the returning sun, and to the brilliant winter night. Shifting hours of light and darkness remind us that change is part of the rhythm of the universe, and so trouble does not last. Acknowledging the gifts of darkness, we also look forward to the growing light, a chance that brings glimmers of hope. We marvel at the beauty of this time, stars unobstructed by leaves, jewels of the night shining over the land, moon and meteors inspiring us to awe and wonder. Let this be a time of celebration. What joy can be found, let us hold it close, blow on its embers, and share its spark. We do not take for granted having come this far, and we give thanks for our companions on the journey. Together we hold a brief time of silence as we breathe. May this winter bring you quiet moments to imagine, to offer gratitude, to bask in the joy and love of the season. So may it be.
Perhaps for a moment, the typewriters will stop clicking, the wheels stop rolling, the computers desist from computing, and a hush will fall over the city. For an instant in the stillness, the chiming of the celestial spheres will be heard as Earth hangs poised in the crystalline darkness, and then gracefully tilts. Let there be a season when holiness is heard, and the splendor of living is revealed. Stunned to stillness by beauty, we remember who we are and why we are here. There are inexplicable mysteries. We are not alone. In the universe, there moves a wild one whose gestures alter Earth's axis toward love. In the immense darkness, everything spins with joy. The cosmos enfolds us. We are caught in a web of stars, cradled in a swaying embrace, rocked by the holy night, babes of the universe. Let this be the time we wake to life, like spring wakes in the moment of winter solstice.
This reading is entitled Prayer at Winter Solstice by Dana Joya. Blessed is the road that keeps us homeless. Blessed is the mountain that blocks our way. Blessed are hunger and thirst, loneliness, and all forms of desire. Blessed is the labor that exhausts us without end. Blessed are the night and the darkness that blinds us. Blessed is the cold that teaches us to feel. Blessed are the cat, the child, the cricket, and the crow. Blessed is the hawk devouring the hare. Blessed are the saint and the sinner who redeem each other. Blessed are the dead, calm in their perfection. Blessed is the pain that humbles us. Blessed is the distance that bars our joy. Blessed is this shortest day that makes us long for light. Blessed is the love that in losing we discover.
So last night we did the last of our pre-holiday events, the Glow Show at the Botanical Garden in New York. If you've never been, the gardens are massive, and for these winter evenings they are mostly off limits. But throughout a small specific set of areas connected by paths, there are light displays, large trees, little mushrooms, lights showing where the roots of the trees might be growing beneath the earth. There was an ice sculptor, a giant series of puffs of light, sort of hard to describe, but made to look like pollen. And all around, the darkness looms and the trees stand tall. All of the gardens in the dark, just beyond the reach of the visitors who take photos and stand in and amongst these holiday lights. And the paths are lined with strings of little globe lights, round spheres that mark the way to go. But occasionally, just because of how the garden is designed, a break in the path makes the way just unclear enough that you have to pause and look ahead for where the lights are shining in the next section. It makes one ever more mindful of the night that is just beyond. And I couldn't help but think about our theme that has been guiding our congregational year, the concept of journey, and the theme of this month, what is your guidepost, your lodestar? What do you follow along your journey? Now, in my own family, the term lodestar was new, and I had to explain. It's a term that refers to the star that a ship would follow, often the northern pole star. It was a guiding, orienting, supposedly fixed entity by which sailors could set a course. What's interesting, and I've shared this before, I think, is that in fact, the stars aren't actually fixed. Though Polaris is currently the pole star, in time a new star will become the North Star. Now, my astronomy skills are pretty limited to what I learned from Neil deGrasse Tyson at the planetarium shows, but essentially, though we think of the night sky as fixed, owing to the tilting and turning of the Earth, it alters incrementally over time. So in 3000 BCE, a different star was closest to true north, and by about 3100 CE, a new star will be closest to true north. Of course, that magnitude of time is somewhat incomprehensible to us, and for most of our purposes, the sky is fixed. But remembering that grand scale reminds me that on some level, nothing is truly fixed. Not in the wild eternity of existence and not in our own finite lives. In any given moment, we might be guided by our pursuit for knowledge or enlightenment, or guided by our principles of justice and freedom, or guided by our desire for love and connection, or guided by our understandings of the cycles of the earth, perhaps all of the above. 4 times a year, we are given opportunities to remember and to lean into the cycles of the earth, and we approach such a moment now. This coming week, the solstice will come, bringing with it its winter barren trees and white snows and dark sparkling nights. Winter comes and brings with it a slowing down, a going within. In recent years, it seems to come more slowly. Perhaps you were, as I was, amazed and slightly horrified at the 60-degree weather of last week. But winter comes even so, and at least here where we live, it will almost certainly bring with it cold rains, air that feels like it can slice the skin, and snow that buries the earth. We talk often about winter as a time of darkness and cold. And indeed, the nights are long and the temperature drops. But then we make the mistake of associating those meteorological realities with things like death, loneliness, sorrow, being lost, and we make negative associations with all of these. But there's another way to look at these truths and these associations as part of the balance of all things. Last week we talked about Bodhi Day and the Buddhist idea that death is only a source of suffering because we attach to certain futures or outcomes and feel pain when they are denied to us, including attaching to the notion of keeping someone or something forever. I don't teach my children quite that since I'm not a Buddhist, but I do always remind them that death is part of life, not an end to life, but a part of this mysterious thing we engage in. And so too is loneliness. So is sorrow. So is being lost on occasion. And we need all of those human experiences, the whole range. Though, of course, we wish for the joy and the sense of being found to outweigh the rest. Still, we need it all, just as that reading by Dana Joya conveys so beautifully. And we live in a time when it's easy to forget the balance, when we can turn on a light or a TV or a radio and shut out the bad feelings with words and music and bright flashing fun. Most of us sitting here today don't have much experience of living without electricity, except perhaps for brief stints of camping. We and our technology are excellent at pretending we have mastery over the cycles and the seasons. We try to block out rather than embrace the truths of winter. And yet we know in our hearts that we can't escape what is real. We can light a light, we can put on a fire, but loneliness is still real, death is still inevitable, and winter will come no matter what. And this is not a bad thing, or it doesn't have to be. There's a life-giving power inherent in this part of the yearly cycle. It's a necessary stage in the development of all things. We forget that it is under the crusty ice in the subnivean layer that animals create tunnels and whole worlds we never see, nurturing each other and life. We forget that the seeds planted early in the year take the time of darkness and cold to gather themselves, to grow and become the glorious flora we see around us. We forget that the plants take this time to dig their roots deep into the ground, the same roots that will sustain them throughout their living. We forget that the quiet stillness of earth is part of the rhythm of all things, just as integral, just as beautiful, just as important as the other seasons and moments. Lynn Cox reminds us of that in the meditation we used this morning. All the ways that life is built below the surface, in the cold and out of sight, and also on the surface and up in the sky. Winter, if we let it, has wisdom and warmth and connection to offer along our journey. Last year, as the pandemic raged and we did not yet have widespread vaccines, the New York Times published a piece by Elizabeth Diaz titled, "How We Survive Winter." In it, Diaz explores the ubiquitous nature of wintertime light-based celebrations, and she also quotes two authors, the indigenous botanist and author of Braiding Sweetgrass, Dr. Robin Wall Kimmerer, and the Episcopal priest and author Barbara Brown Taylor. I was revisiting the piece this week, and wisdom from both of these writers really struck home. Dr. Kimmerer, who's also the director of the Center for Native Peoples and the Environment at the SUNY College of Environmental Science and Forestry, is quoted in that piece saying this: "In wintertime, all life is on that knife edge between life and death. Winter is a teacher of vulnerability." And Taylor is quoted saying, "I have spent some long, scary nights waiting for the sun to come up. There have also been some long, barren seasons when I feared the sap would never rise again. The hardest thing is to keep trusting the cycle, to keep trusting that the balance will shift again, even when I can't imagine how. So far, it has." Vulnerability and trust. Vulnerability because the season can be harsh, can ask a lot of our bodies and minds. I think of the northernmost parts of Alaska, inhabited with towns, where the sun sets in the fall and remains below the horizon line for over 2 months. Or the northern parts of Canada and Scandinavia, where the sun rises for a scant few hours, low in the sky on winter days. We try to convince ourselves of our control, but a rough snowstorm and medical care is more inaccessible. A deeply cold day and the strain on our power grid can stretch us thin, not to mention the buffeting of the elements on folks without homes. We humans are vulnerable in the winter, made even more so by the ongoing pandemic and increasing numbers across the nation. Winter makes us vulnerable, though we try to push that away. And this year we are as undeniably vulnerable as ever. And then trust, because the cycles are known to us, to our brains, our bones, even when our hearts hold fear. Trust that what we know to be true is true, that winter will end and spring will come. Trust that the systems and structures of community and care that we have built will sustain us. Trust that in our own hearts and minds are a reserve of strength that can help us weather the challenge. Winter asks us to trust in things we can't control. Trust in the efforts we have made and the love we have created. So winter is a teacher, and the vulnerability and trust we cultivate in this season serves us throughout the year. It serves us when we enter relationship with each other, because we cannot control each other, or the course of the relationships we build, or the ways that people change over time. But for fullness and wholeness to exist in our relationships, we have to make ourselves vulnerable, and we have to trust. The vulnerability and trust we cultivate during this season serves us as we make our journey through every season, because we are asked to trust in the lodestar we have chosen at any given moment and make ourselves vulnerable to the struggles of life in order to experience the fullness. Though lighting candles in the night seems to be to some degree universal, the way that we view winter with a kind of resignation or fear is not. Some time ago, I watched a cooking show about Norwegian cuisine, and the presenter took the viewers on a trip to the north in the winter, a trip to the parts of Norway where the sun never rises, and it's cold and dark all day, so an even harsher winter than we know. I can only imagine that that might get a bit discouraging or disheartening, and one might start to feel overcome. But these countries that experience these intense winters have a tool that I'm sure you have heard of that they use during these winter months it's a tool that's an invitation to community and joy. In Denmark, it's called hygge, and in Norway, kuseli, and in other countries there are other words, but none of them translate very well into English. It's something like cozy, with a sense of belonging, togetherness, friendly invitation, intimacy. So if you think about like warm socks or big thick sweaters or like cocoa or a cappuccino in front of a fire, that's what we're talking about. You can think maybe of the feeling we get here at Christmas Eve. Or you can think of the squirrels laying up acorns when the winter comes so they can return to that store again and again. These things, this hygge and kuseli, are possible anytime, but they are most possible in the winter, when the cold creeps in and we might be inclined to stay away or separate, to huddle down. The cold winter offers a chance to create a certain and special kind of warmth. It's the idea of leaning into the cold, not pushing it away. Leaning into the possibility that it holds, to the deepening of roots and the strengthening of ties that exist below the surface, to the vulnerability and trust that it asks of us. And all of that is so appealing to me, even in the best of times, and it is perhaps even more appealing right now. In that piece from the Times last year, Taylor also had this to say. She wrote, "I've stopped trying to handle the darkness. I let the darkness handle me. Most of the time, all it wants to do is hold me for a while, slow me down, keep me from running, Cover me up long enough to remember that being in the dark doesn't mean there's something wrong with me. It means I'm alive, and this is part of the deal. So that coziness that these northern countries know, it isn't about chasing away the winter or hastening the springtime. It's about allowing this time to be what it is, letting this moment exist for us now, and letting the cycles and the balance that the earth shares with us year in and year out work on us, work its magic on us, hold us, cover us, remind us that we are alive, remind us that nothing lasts forever. And I will say it's especially appealing to me now as I find myself increasingly nervous about the newest variant and its impact on our lives and connections, as I ask myself again if this is just our life now, and what that means for my own future and my family's future. So the call to stop trying to rush ahead to something different, and to just be present to each holiday light show and each mug of coffee and each cozy sweater, that's a call that feels so strong right now. And it is not to be mistaken for the call of apathy or fear-based paralysis or the call to block and push away. It's the call to know that though there are things I can and should do to protect myself, to increase my joy and my survival, there are fundamental truths I cannot change. All I can do is let myself live and love and be vulnerable and trust and take what comfort I can where I can. Our journeys are not taken in complete darkness, without direction. But there are moments when we get lost, where we lose sight, moments when the world feels too close and too impossible, moments when we are so unsure of what will come, what lurks beyond the ring of light. And winter teaches us how to survive those moments. Each year, we're given a chance to learn, to practice, to remember what it is to cultivate joy and intimacy and coziness and comfort, even on the shortest day, even on the coldest night. Each year, the earth teaches us that the ground itself holds a wealth of magic and wisdom as it readies itself to come to life again. Each year, winter teaches not only vulnerability and trust, but also wonder. Wonder that something lives and thrives and finds a way. In her work, Braiding Sweetgrass, Dr. Robin Wall-Kimmerer describes her thoughts after teaching a group of students out in the field. And she writes, "I had given them so much information, all the patterns and processes laid on so thick as to obscure the most important truth. I missed my chance," she writes, "leading them down every path save the one that matters most. How will people ever care for the fate of moss spiders if we don't teach students to recognize and respond to the world as a gift? I told them all about how it works and nothing of what it meant. We may as well have stayed home and read about the Smokies. In effect, against all my prejudices, I'd worn a lab coat into the wilderness. Betrayal is a heavy load, and I plodded along, suddenly weary." And she writes, "I turned to see the students coming down the trail behind me, a petal-strewn path in gauzy light. One person, I don't know who, began to sing ever so quietly, those familiar first notes, the ones that open your throat, irresistibly calling you to sing. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. One by one, they joined in, singing in the long shadows and a drift of white petals setting on our shoulders. That saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found." She writes, "I was humbled. Their singing said everything that my well-intentioned lectures did not. On and on they went, adding harmonies as they walked. I heard in their raised voices the same outpouring of love and gratitude for the creation that Sky Woman first sang on the back of Turtle Island. In their caress of that old hymn, I came to know that it wasn't naming the source of wonder that mattered. It was wonder itself." It's a beautiful image, a moment captured in words. a reminder that we are human and we will always get a little bit lost, whether we're walking through dimly lit gardens or following our professor down a petal-strewn path in the Smokies. We will always need to look for that lodestar. And we can be grateful for the knowledge that it is not precisely and forever fixed, but can change as we change, like a living thing working in harmony with us as we find our way. We are human, tiny in the face of Earth's grandeur, and yet ourselves a part of it, blessed to move through the seasons we are given, to know the cold and the dark, to know depth and know magic. Winter comes, and with it comes darkness, hidden growth. And so to close our service, I want to offer you a poem. It's a prayer titled Winter's Cloak by Joyce Rupp. And in it, she longs for just a little more winter, a little more time for seeking and sinking in before the light returns. So we close with her words. This year, I do not want the dark to leave me. I need its wrap of silent stillness, its cloak of long-lasting embrace. Too much light has pulled me away from the chamber of gestation. Let the dawns come late, let the sunsets arrive early, let the evenings extend themselves while I lean into the abyss of my being. Let me lie in the cave of my soul, for too much light blinds me, steals the source of revelation. Let me seek solace in the empty places of winter's passage, those vast dark nights that never fail to shelter me. May we take this time, this winter, not to rush ahead, but to be present to now, cultivating warmth and delight, allowing ourselves to be vulnerable and to trust in the earth and in each other, putting roots down deeper and creating life below what can be seen, extending love in ways ancient and new. So may it be.
Please join in singing our hymn, number 308, The Blessings of the Earth and Sky. Ron will play it through once.
A reminder that in Anderson, you cannot sing, you can only hum. Sorry. Sorry, Alas, go ahead.
Please join in singing our hymn, number 308, The Blessings of the Earth and Sky. Ron will play it through once. The blessings of the earth and sky upon our friendly house do lie. The rightness of a master's art has blessed with grace its every part. The warmth of many hands is strewn in human blessing on this stone. The wind upon the lakes and hills performs its native rituals. The worship of our human toil brings sacrament from sun and soil. With words and music we, the earth, in nature's wonder seek our worth. Here we restore ancestral dreams, enshrined in floor and wall and beam, a monument wherein we build that their high purpose
Please join in the words for extinguishing the chalice. They'll be on the screen. We extinguish the flame, but may the light of truth, the warmth of love, and the energy of action burn bright in our hearts until we are together again. As the night deepens, tilt toward knowledge of yourself. Tilt toward honest intimacy, tilt toward vulnerable sharing, tilt toward the cycles of the earth and give and receive love in new ways. Go in peace.